Huh?
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, featuring your hosts, Taylor Field and Reuben Olson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Cryptid Clues, Campfire Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going back into the realm of Sasquatch. It's kind of like more of a follow-up, I guess, to our episode me and Reuben did earlier this week, which was our introduction to Bigfoot and just kind of our perspective and our take on the cryptid itself, and definitely worth checking out. We get into a lot of cool stuff, and there were still some encounters that I did not share in that episode that I thought, okay, gotta space it out. These are some great encounters that I just wanted to get back and talk about, and I didn't want to throw all of them out in that previous episode. I thought there's enough here to continue on for a Campfire Clues episode, so I figured why not just do it. But before we get into that, a couple of plugs. Be sure to check us out on our social media channels. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca. It's our main website. You can find us on our social media channels. Patreon as well, if you want to get ad-free exclusive early content there. And we're also available just to say hi, email. We're doing a call out not too long ago. We're reaching out. If anyone has any experiences, stories they want to share, or they want to talk to us, you can send us an email. It's completely confidential, CryptidClues@gmail.com. So without further ado, we're going to get into our first Sasquatch encounter of the night here. And I quote, "I just wanted to share a couple of encounters I had and see if anyone else had something happen in these areas. First one happened in the summer of 2005. My friends and I had decided to go camping up at the end of Stave Lake. We found a small campsite, approximately 2,000 feet, had our fun and settled down for the night. The next morning, my friend and I decided to walk up the road more to see what was up there. We found a pristine camping spot around 200 yards up the hill from us with an amazing view. As we approached this site, we heard something hit the ground near us. We stopped, looked at each other, and shrugged it off. Seconds later, another one hit the ground. We got nervous, so we turned around, thinking maybe someone was shooting a BB gun or something. Later that morning, we drove back up there and realized there was no one around. It took me a few years to realize something was throwing rocks at us." And this continues. The second encounter was about a year later in the early fall. Me and the same friend went mountain biking up the trails off of 287th. The whole hike to the top, something felt eerie. We started to ride down the trails, which I got about halfway down and got a flat tire. After cussing about not bringing a repair kit, I decided I better start walking my bike down. We got back on the logging road, and the first rock had hit the ground. Once again, we shrugged it off. And then about 10 minutes later, another one. At this point, we were pretty confused. Another 5-10 minutes rolls by and another one hits the ground. I realized something really weird was going on as I felt I was being watched. We finally said screw this, and I hopped on my bike and rode the rest of the way on the flat tire. The last encounter I had was in 2007 when I was hunting. This, however, did not take place in Maple Ridge, or Bone Lake. We came to the end of a clear cut. Having seen a few deer here before, I decided to hop out and walk up the activated road. I got about 500 yards up this road and I heard a loud snap. I immediately knew it was big. Thinking it was a bear or moose. At this time, it was about 30 feet and no moose. I stomped on the ground as hard as I could to get it to move forth, trying to see this thing, knowing how close. It's fascinating. I looked into the area and there's a concentration of Bigfoot occurrences that seem to happen in this general area. And I compiled the streets and just this general location. And I'm going to pitch this to Reuben because this is a place I would love to go check out. And it's It's not necessarily Maple Ridge, but it's in like a district of Mission essentially, and there's all these streets and everything like that. But it's trackable, it's findable, and I'm confident I know exactly the route that they're talking about, especially with that biking trail. And it's just terrifying. This individual, he never saw this thing, but it's the exact same occurrence with these rocks landing. And I personally don't know what the significance of the rocks landing, if it's maybe, I guess, just a form of communication or an alert or something like that. Like, if you get too far into something's territory, they're going to let you know that you've come a little too far. You need to back off and back away, or things will get a little bit more aggressive. And what kind of human being who's out in the bush alone, has rocks being thrown at him, is going to hang around there? We've all seen horror movies, and we know, okay, something is definitely not right, and we're going to go. So I don't blame this guy for doing the right thing. But without further ado, we'll get into our next encounter here. And I quote, "Last summer, August 2010, my family went camping at Deer Lake, located in Sasquatch Provincial Park. I woke up in the middle of the night to go to the washroom. I grabbed my hubby to come with me, and he was holding the flashlight. On our way to the outhouse, I heard some rustling in the bushes beside me, and I jumped and whispered to my hubby that I heard something. Just thinking it was a wild animal of some sort, not too worried at this point. As we turned the corner to the outhouse, I looked back and could see a dark figure that was standing upright with black hair. I was so scared I couldn't say anything. I just kept walking and asking myself in my head if I really saw what I did, as it was dark and in the middle of the night. The next morning I mentioned it to my husband, who by surprise took me seriously. I also remember that night I heard this weird noise over and over again. It almost sounded like a loon call, but more uglier. Today, July 17th, 2011, we have just came back from a camping trip at Hicks Lake, which is the other part of Sasquatch Provincial Park. It was in the middle of the night, last night, when we heard this weird call outside our tent, and it was extremely loud, like something we have never heard before. The sound is similar to the Oregon Bigfoot website. Not only did we hear it outside our tent calling about 3 times, there was another animal answering it across the campground in the exact same manner. We came home and decided to look up animal sounds such as raccoons and owls, but nothing came close to what we heard. Finally, we looked up the Sasquatch, and there it was. This is the sound we heard. Not to mention there had been a reported sighting of the 15th of a bear in the area. Maybe it was something else? I'd love to hear from anyone else that's been camping here if they heard this same noise." End quote. Again, absolutely terrifies me. There's been a lot of encounters, again, of campsites being closely investigated by these large, hairy figures. And of course, its name, the provincial park has its name, Sasquatch, for a reason. It's definitely got its fair share of uninvited guests that are strolling in to warrant such a name. But nonetheless, to be that close to be going to get to the outhouse, I couldn't imagine if this woman got up and decided to go off on her own. Not like, sure, many people do. You're out camping, you think nothing of it. An outhouse isn't too far away. I've been out camping with my wife many times, and the outhouse is usually within 15 feet, 10 feet of you, and there's usually a campsite next to you or across from you, and with a little bit of privacy involved, but not too scarce as well. But there's no dismissing the amount of bush that's still present in that area, and the odd wild animal that could come in. And sure, they thought that was the case. They thought, oh, it must be some miscellaneous wild animal that's just stirring in the bush, but whatever it was, and whatever time this took place at in the middle of the night, this thing strolled in there, was intrigued. And it's just one of those senses that people have. You get that sixth sense where sometimes you don't want to do something on your own. I get that too. So you're walking or you're moving, and you don't necessarily feel like you're watched per se, like the individual in our first encounter, but something is wrong, and it may not be evident, it may not be just displaying itself full blown, but you just have an inkling and you think, you know what, I just don't want to go to the bathroom alone, like hold the flashlight, everything like that. Things are always presently happening for a reason, sometimes beyond our knowing, and it's attributed to maybe a guardian angel or thank God he's with me, and it's just something along those lines, when in reality it's just could be an instinct or something like that, where you just have someone do it. I'm just running off of my basic kind of interpretation. Don't quote me on any of this or believe this is the way it is or anything like that, but for whatever reason anyone believes, this woman made the right choice of not going in alone, and it could have just been out of pure fear of the dark, which is a survival instinct in itself. Gave her husband the flashlight, they went out together, and she saw it. I'm baffled that she didn't say anything that night to him, but you just probably want to forget it, and you think, oh, I'm just seeing things, because the dark does play tricks on your eyes. But sure enough, he took it very seriously the next day. So I'm curious if there's any pre-existing knowledge that the husband had about Bigfoot, or if maybe he had an occurrence or an experience that he just didn't share with her. But the fact that he took it very seriously makes me wonder, okay, there must be some pre-existing kind of notion here attached to at least his take on it. But before we get into our last sighting here, I'm just going to jump to a quick ad break, and we will be right back. And we're back. So we got our last encounter here that we will dive into. And I quote, "There seems to be a few stories of the Sasquatch around Stave Lake. Well, I grew up in that area and have had 2 encounters as well. The first encounter was when I was quite young. Maybe when I was about 8 or 9 years old. It's around 1980. Me and 4 of my friends were on our bikes, and we're up on the power line roads between Bell Road and Cathy Crescent. We had just come over a ridge that was a mile or so, maybe from Bell Road, and saw what we think is the Sasquatch. A large, dark brown black figure, about 8 feet tall, staring at us from the lightly wooded section of trees. We all stopped and looked back at it for a few seconds, looked at each other, and were on our bikes heading back home as fast as we could. We were too far away to make out any details of its face, but we were quite sure it wasn't a bear, as we could see the outline of its whole body. My second encounter would have been around 1988, and I was with one of my friends from the first encounter. This time we're on my motorcycles, and we're biking up the logging roads behind Stave Lake. This was something we did for fun, looking for new roads and paths and finding ways to get over to Alouette Lake. Lots of fun, and sometimes we would end up hours away from home, or end up in unexpected places. One time we did find a road that took us over to Alouette Lake, although I think we just drove a small cliff to get over it. This time we were going up a road that looked like it would just take us to the top of this little mountain. Once we got near to the top, we decided to stop our bikes and take a break from riding. Below us was a clear cut, but next to where we stopped, there was a fairly dense, grown-in forested area. Well, we hadn't stopped our bikes for a minute when something started screaming at us from the bush. We never saw anything, but the sound this thing made was like nothing I'd ever heard. It made such a loud scream. It was something big, not human, but not a bear. It sounded like a wild man. I think quite similar to what others have described. It was close to us, and we weren't interested in seeing it up close. So we were on our bikes and halfway down the mountain before we stopped again. Although we didn't see it, this encounter really confirmed for me that there is something out there, because your eyes can fool you, but not your ears. Anyways, I want to reaffirm that the Stave Lake area is a hotspot for these creatures, from my experience. And that concludes all of those encounters. I love the last one there, especially because it's relatable. I've gone out with my dad, and we will go down these old dirt roads and just exploring. And my dad has done it way more than I have, but he hops on his bike and he'll go off alone and go out exploring and just seeing what he can see and finding new roads and finding cool little lakes that are remotely accessible. And it's truly an invigorating experience. It's a great time, but you are in the thick of the wood. You are out there and there's no other people necessarily around. All the people that go out there, they go, they stop themselves short. They may pull up to the side of the road and go to like more common lakes and explorations and little campsites where more people are gathered. But it's the trickier spots where maybe you need a little bit of bike, you need like a quad, or you need some on the boots on the ground hiking to get to these more remote areas. And that's what my dad likes to do. He likes to go way out there and explore. Like I said, that's where you're going to see some of these things. Not all the time, like in our previous encounter where it comes to the campsite at Sasquatch Provincial Park. And those occurrences do happen, but there's an escalated risk when you go out into their territory. And you got to be careful. And if this is speaking to anyone that goes out there and they're not prepared and they just want to go out and see one, be extra careful. I know people, again, reiterating my father here, went out on his bike and he hit a wrong part of turf or ground and he flew over his handlebars and he had to go to the hospital after this, but he wouldn't have been able to get out if it wasn't for the fact that he was able to just kind of patch up his like hip a little bit and kind of truck through the pain and just try to get out of there. Like, and again, lifting the bike up is a little bit of a exertion as well when it kind of falls over, but it's a cautious trek, and I respect people that go out and do it because I've done it and it's a lot of fun though, and you can't let these things deter that level of enjoyment. And when you get up to high points too, you're going to see things as well. You'll be able to see little clearings, just like this individual had experience when he went up to this top little part and this thing started howling at him. Now, I haven't had that aspect happen, but I have been hiking up with a group of people looking down, and there's this nice little opening out in the middle of the bush, and here comes this black silhouetted figure strolling out. Pretty confident it was a bear, judging by its motions. Definitely nothing Bigfoot related, but it's absolutely credible at some points. The open, clear-cut areas, something will stroll out, and who knows as to what reason. They're just getting some sun probably, but these things happen. And that's all I got on all those encounters, but I hope you really enjoyed them. These, again, were things I wanted to shout out to Reuben, but I thought, these are so good, and there's so many of them. I can talk about these all day if I move into another episode, so we'll space that out. But by all means, go check out the introductory Bigfoot episode that me and Reuben did. There will be more Bigfoot content that we dive into and explore. I think we've kind of found our footing a little bit in the variety of cryptids we've talked about, and we're going to be kind of honing in a little bit more and doing more research on the specific ones that at least they're very much more appealing to us, like the certain selected underwater cryptids and Dogman and Bigfoot and Sasquatch that are found in other areas of the world as well. And these are the ones that we really want to be able to discuss and try and find the right information, condense it, and put it out to you guys. And again, that information is extremely vague and at any point could be disregarded because we're not professionals. At the end of the day, me and Reuben are very basic and just sharing a love and an interest for these topics. And it just means the world that we can share them with you guys too in a way that hopefully you guys can all understand and can enjoy. And especially these kind of shows are great for road trips. 9 times out of 10, I'm listening to a show or something like this going on a long road trip because it just seems to go hand in hand. And yeah, so hopefully you'll enjoy it in some shape or form in that manner. But until next time, you can find us at CryptidClues.ca. You can find us all over the web on our social media channels, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, ad-free exclusive early episodes there, and you can again send us an email. If you have any stories, encounters, or tales you just want to talk to us about or say hi, cryptidclues@gmail.com. And until next time, stay safe, take care, we'll see you soon.